The mass continued in silence as dark trucks surrounded the church, bringing chaos and terror. Armed men stormed into the temple, demanding money and spreading fear, unaware of who was truly among the faithful. Among the innocent, a millionaire with a dark past patiently waited for the right moment to act. That night, the cartels would learn the hard way that they had chosen the wrong target. The sun was setting slowly on the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange as the faithful entered St. Cecilia's Church for the evening mass. The atmosphere was serene, illuminated by candles and the golden glow of stained glass windows. At the back of the central nave, seated on one of the hand-carved wooden pews, was Alexander Montgomery, an imposing man in a dark suit with an attentive gaze. At 55, he was known not only for his fortune at the helm of Montgomery Industries, but also for a past shrouded in mystery. His gaze alternated between the altar and the marble tomb, where his wife, Mary Helen, had rested for exactly 10 years. The words of the last anonymous note he had received still echoed in his mind. The past always collects its debts, Montgomery, and the time for reckoning has come. It was the third message in less than a month, all referring to a period of his life that he struggled to keep buried. Father John began the ceremony, his deep voice filling the sacred space. Alexander tried to concentrate on the words of the sermon, but his thoughts constantly took him back 25 years, when he had served as a special government agent on confidential missions. It was during this time that he met Mary Helen, then a young doctor working on humanitarian missions. Their marriage marked the beginning of his new life as a businessman, building an empire that now employed thousands of people. During communion, Alexander noticed an unusual movement near the church entrance. A middle-aged man wearing a well-cut suit was watching him intently. Their eyes met for a brief moment, and Alexander recognized those eyes. They were the same as Robert Anderson's, his former partner on special missions, whom he hadn't seen in more than 2 decades. Alexander's heart raced, but his face remained impassive. Robert had mysteriously disappeared after a crucial mission abroad, and his supposed absence had always haunted Alexander. Now there he was, like a ghost from the past materialized among the church pews. After Mass, as the faithful dispersed, Alexander remained seated, pretending to pray. Through the reflection in one of the stained glass windows, he observed Robert, slowly approaching. The ex-partner sat down on the bench beside him, maintaining a respectful distance. "Long time no see, Montgomery," said Robert, his voice hoarser than Alexander remembered. "You've built an impressive life for yourself." "What do you want, Robert?" Alexander asked, keeping his voice low. "After all this time, I came to warn you," Robert interrupted, looking fixedly at the altar. "They found out about Operation Antares. All those involved are being contacted." Alexander felt a chill down his spine. Operation Antares had been his last mission, a complex operation that resulted in a discovery that could change the course of history. It was after this mission that he decided to leave the agency and start a new life with Mary Helen. "That was 25 years ago," Alexander replied, trying to keep calm. All the files were sealed. "Some secrets are too big to remain buried," Robert whispered, standing up. "Your daughter Claire, she's investigating her mother's past for her documentary project, isn't she? Maybe it's time to tell her the truth about how you and Mary Helen really met." Before Alexander could respond, Robert was already walking towards the exit, leaving him with a whirlwind of thoughts. Claire, his only daughter, had recently started a documentary about doctors in conflict zones, inspired by her late mother's work. What would she discover if she kept digging into the past? That night, upon returning to his mansion in the most exclusive neighborhood of the city, Alexander found Claire in his office, surrounded by old photos and documents. At 24, she was the spitting image of Mary Helen, the same determined eyes, the same gentle smile. "Dad," she said, without taking her eyes off the documents, "I found something strange in Mum's files. All references to her work between 1998 and 2000 seem to have disappeared. It's as if she had vanished from the map during those years." Alexander sat heavily in his leather armchair, feeling the weight of decades of secrets on his shoulders. Robert's reappearance and now Claire's discoveries couldn't be a coincidence. The past he had fought so hard to bury was emerging, and he would need to quickly decide how to protect his daughter without losing her trust. "Claire," he began carefully, choosing his words, "there are things about your mother's past, about our past, that are complicated to explain." "What kind of things, Dad?" Claire asked, finally looking directly at him, her eyes shining with curiosity and distrust. Alexander opened his mouth to respond, but was interrupted by the sound of the phone. On the screen, an unknown number flashed threateningly. His heart raced. Would it be another anonymous message or someone from his past emerging from the shadows to collect old debts? Alexander stared at the phone for a few seconds before answering. On the other end of the line, only silence. Then, a female voice, all too familiar, broke the tension. "How much longer do you intend to hide the truth from her, Alexander?" He felt his blood run cold. It was Beatrice Anderson, Robert's wife and former chief scientist of Operation Antares. Her voice carried the same authoritative tone from 2 decades ago. "Beatrice," he replied, turning his back to Claire, trying to keep his voice controlled. "I thought we had an agreement." "Agreements change when new information comes to light," she retorted. "I found something in Mary Helen's old files, something that could compromise everything we've built. We need to talk, in person." Claire watched her father with growing curiosity. Even though she couldn't hear the other side of the conversation, she could tell something was wrong by the way his shoulders tensed. "Tomorrow, 10 a.m. at the usual place," Alexander responded briefly, hanging up immediately. As he turned, he met his daughter's inquisitive gaze. "Dad, what's going on?" Claire asked, standing up. "First those strange messages you've been receiving, now this call? Does it have something to do with Mom's disappearance from the records?" Alexander walked to the old mahogany bookcase that occupied an entire wall of the office. With precise movements, he typed a combination on the small numeric keypad hidden behind one of the books. A soft click revealed a secret compartment. "Your mother," he began, removing a yellowed folder, "wasn't just a doctor on humanitarian missions. She was part of a special team working on a revolutionary project." Claire approached, her eyes fixed on the folder her father was holding. On the cover, a red stamp indicated "Confidential, Operation Antares." "In 1998, Alexander continued, the American government discovered something extraordinary during a scientific expedition in the Amazon, something that could change the course of modern medicine. Your mother was recruited to lead the medical research while I was there to ensure the operation's security. But in the archives I found, Mom appears only as a doctor in refugee camps during that period," Claire argued, quickly leafing through her notes. "That was our cover," Alexander explained, carefully opening the folder. "What we discovered was too valuable to be exposed. Pharmaceutical companies from all over the world would have done anything to get their hands on that research." From the yellowed pages, Alexander removed a photograph. In it, a group of people posed in front of an improvised laboratory in the jungle. Mary Helen was in the center, smiling, next to a woman Claire immediately recognized from scientific magazines, Beatrice Anderson, the renowned researcher who revolutionized the field of biotechnology in the 2000s. "Aunt Beatrice?" Claire asked, surprised. "The same one who used to visit us when I was little. She was part of this." "Beatrice was the project's chief scientist," Alexander confirmed. "She and your mother developed the most promising research of their careers together. But something went wrong. There was an information leak, and powerful people found out about the project." Claire sat down again, trying to process the information. "Is that why Mom always seemed so worried when I talked about pursuing a scientific career?" "Partially," Alexander replied, his voice heavy with regret. "What happened during Operation Antares changed all of us, your mother especially. She discovered something she shouldn't have." Before he could continue, Claire's cell phone vibrated. It was a message from an unknown number. "Dear Claire, there's a lot your father isn't telling you. If you want to know the truth about your mother, meet me tomorrow at the Bella Vista Cafe at 9 a.m. B.A." Claire looked at her father, who was still holding the folder, lost in thought. Beatrice was clearly trying to go over his head, scheduling. a meeting an hour before the one he had just arranged with her father. "I think I have an appointment tomorrow morning too," she said, putting away her phone without showing the message to her father. If he could keep secrets, so could she. Alexander nodded distractedly, putting the folder back in the safe. The sound of the mechanism closing echoed through the office like an omen. Father and daughter looked at each other, both aware that they were on the brink of revelations that could forever change their relationship. Outside the mansion, a figure observed the scene through the office window. Robert Anderson lowered his binoculars and picked up the phone. "She received the message," he said to someone on the other end of the line. "The plan is in motion." Morning arrived with a fine drizzle typical of Washington, D.C. At 8:45, Claire was already seated at the Bella Vista Cafe, an untouched cup of coffee in front of her. The sea. Place was elegant and discreet, frequented mainly by executives and artists seeking privacy. Through the window, she watched the raindrops slide, forming random patterns that resembled the mysteries surrounding her family. Precisely at 9 a.m., Beatrice Anderson entered the cafe. Even at 65, she maintained the proud posture and penetrating gaze that had made her a legend in the scientific world. Her grey hair, elegantly arranged, framed a face that carried the weight of many secrets. "Claire, my dear," Beatrice smiled, sitting down. "You look more like your mother every day." "Aunt Beatrice," Claire responded, trying to maintain her composure. "Why all this mystery? What do you know about my mother that my father is hiding?" Beatrice took a small red-covered diary from her bag, worn by time. "This was your mother's personal diary during Operation Antares. She asked me to keep it in case something happened to her." Meanwhile, on the other side of the city, Alexander arrived at the National Arboretum for his scheduled meeting with Beatrice. To his surprise, he found only Robert waiting for him at the agreed location. "My wife asked me to tell you she had a more important commitment," Robert explained, an enigmatic smile on his lips. "But we have a lot to talk about, old friend." By Pickhorns. At the cafe, Claire was leafing through the diary with trembling hands. The pages were filled with her mother's delicate handwriting, interspersed with chemical formulas and scientific notes. "Our discovery in the Amazon was not a coincidence," Beatrice explained, her voice low and controlled. "We found a previously unknown plant species with extraordinary medicinal properties. Its cells had the ability to regenerate in a way we had never seen before." Claire found a specific entry in the diary, dated September 15th, 1999. "Today we managed to isolate the active compound. It's revolutionary. It could be the cure we've been looking for, but BA is different. There's something in her eyes when she talks about monetizing the discovery. Alexander needs to know." "What happened next?" Claire asked, her heart racing. "Your mother discovered that I had different plans for our research," Beatrice admitted. "While she wanted to make the treatment freely available to underprivileged populations, I saw the commercial potential. Billions could be generated from patents." At the National Arboretum, Robert was conducting a parallel conversation with Alexander. "You never wondered why Mary Helen was so agitated in the days before the accident?" Robert questioned, observing the rare orchids in the greenhouse. Alexander felt a shiver. She was worried about information leaks from the project. "No, my friend," Robert smiled sadly. "She had discovered that Operation Antares had a hidden objective from the beginning. The medicinal plant was just the surface. There was something much bigger at stake." Back at the cafe, Beatrice continued her revelations. "Mary Helen found documents she shouldn't have seen," she explained. "She discovered that before our expedition, military satellites had detected a magnetic anomaly in the region. The plant was a byproduct of something much more valuable buried in the forest." Claire felt her head spin. "What exactly was buried there?" "An artifact," Beatrice responded, lowering her voice even more. "Something that defied everything we knew about history and science. Your mother believed it was the true source of the regenerative properties of the plants around it." At the National Arboretum, Robert handed Alexander a flash drive. "All the original files of the operation are here," he said. including Mary Helen's latest discoveries. She didn't have a simple accident, Alexander. She was about to expose the entire project. Claire continued her conversation with Beatrice, now holding a photo she found in the diary. It showed her mother next to a partially buried metallic structure with indecipherable inscriptions. "Why are you telling me this now?" Claire asked, her voice trembling. "Because your mother developed a decoding algorithm before she left," Beatrice responded. "And you, my dear, with your knowledge of technology and linguistics, may be the only person capable of completing her work." The clock struck 10:30. At two different points in the city, father and daughter were receiving revelations that would change their lives forever. And somewhere, hidden in the depths of the Amazon, a millennial secret waited to be rediscovered. Claire left the Bella Vista Cafe with her mind in turmoil, her mother's diary safely tucked in her bag like a precious treasure. The drizzle had turned into heavy rain, but she barely noticed the water soaking her clothes. Her hands trembled as she held the steering wheel of her car, parked a few blocks away. Inside the vehicle, she opened the diary again, finding a note she hadn't seen during the conversation with Beatrice. "The algorithm is hidden where it all began. Claire will know how to find it when the time comes. The key is the music we used to play together." Her mother always played the piano, and Claire accompanied her on the violin. It was one of the most precious memories of her childhood. But how could this be a key to a decoding algorithm? Meanwhile, at the National Arboretum, Alexander confronted Robert. "Why did Mary Helen never tell me about her suspicions?" he asked, his voice laden with contained emotion. Robert adjusted his glasses thoughtfully. "She wanted to protect you. The less you knew, the safer you would be. But now, with Claire investigating the past, all the walls we built are crumbling." "Claire," Alexander murmured, suddenly alert. "Where's Beatrice now?" Robert smiled enigmatically. "Probably finishing a very interesting conversation with your daughter." Alexander felt his blood run cold. He immediately took out his cell. Phone dialing Claire's number, straight to voicemail. His heart raced. She never turned off her phone. At the Montgomery mansion, Claire arrived drenched. She ran straight to the old music room, a room that had remained untouched since her mother's departure. The grand piano still occupied the center of the room, covered by a thin layer of dust. She sat on the bench, her hands gliding softly over the keys. The melody her mother loved so much, a composition of her own called Antares, began to flow from her fingers as if she had never stopped playing. It was a complex piece, with a peculiar pattern of notes that had always intrigued Claire, for its unconventional mathematical structure. As she played, her technologist's eyes began to see beyond the music. The pattern of notes, and it wasn't just a composition, it was a code. "The notes are coordinates," she whispered to herself, her fingers freezing over the keys. Each sequence represents a specific location. At the National Arboretum, Alexander was preparing to leave when Robert held him by the arm. "Before you go after her, there's something you need to see," he said, handing him a tablet. On the screen, an old email from Mary Helen to Beatrice. "The real treasure is not the artifact, but what it taught us. The cure is in the music, not in the technology. Claire will understand when the time comes." Alexander frowned. "The music?" Mary Helen was composing something before she left. "It wasn't just a composition," Robert explained. "It was a map, a code. Your wife was brilliant, Alexander. She transformed geographic coordinates into a musical score. The exact location, where we found the artifact, is hidden in the notes." Back at the mansion, Claire had already transferred the score to her laptop and was running a musical analysis program. Each note was converted into numbers, creating a pattern that was beginning to make sense. "Amazon coordinates," she murmured, her eyes shining with the discovery. "But there's more with the harmonic structure. They're decoding instructions." Her cell phone, which she had turned off to concentrate, came back to life with several missed calls from her father. But before she could return them, a new message from Beatrice arrived. "Your mother knew you would decipher the code. Now do you understand why we need you? The artifact is still there, waiting. With your knowledge of technology and your mother's algorithm, we can finally understand what we found." Claire looked at her mother's diary, at the laptop with the deciphered coordinates, and at Beatrice's message. A decision needed to be made. Continuing her mother's discoveries could reveal revolutionary secrets for humanity, but it could also put her on the same dangerous path her mother had trodden. The sound of a car abruptly parking at the entrance of the mansion indicated that her father had arrived. Claire quickly put away the laptop and the diary. Some discoveries needed to remain secret, at least for now. Alexander entered the music room breathless, finding Claire sitting at the piano, apparently serene. "Did you talk to Beatrice?" he asked, trying to control his breathing. "Yes," Claire replied, her fingers absent-mindedly caressing the piano keys. "She told me many interesting stories about Mom." Father and daughter stared at each other, both aware that they were keeping secrets from one another. The distant sound of thunder echoed through the mansion, as if nature itself was announcing that a much bigger storm was coming. Night fell over the Montgomery mansion, the rain still lashing the windows forcefully. In the study, Alexander paced, back and forth, phone in hand, speaking in a low voice with Robert. "She knows more than she's saying," he whispered, casting a worried glance at the closed door. Beatrice must have shown her something. Upstairs in her room, Claire was working frenetically on her laptop. The Antares score was fully digitized, and a program of her own creation was transforming the notes into numerical sequences. On the E's, screen numbers and symbols danced like a perfectly orchestrated mathematical choreography. "Mom, you really were brilliant," she murmured to herself, admiring the complexity of the code hidden in the music. Each measure not only represented geographic coordinates, but also contained detailed instructions about the artifact found in the Amazon. An audio file in her mother's digital diary caught her attention. It was a recording dated 2 weeks before her death. Claire connected her headphones and pressed play. "Claire, my daughter," Mary Helen's voice filled her ears, making her eyes water. "If you're listening to this, it means you've found the diary and started deciphering the algorithm. There's something you need to know about the artifact. It's not of this world." Claire felt a shiver run down her spine. The recording continued. "What we found in the Amazon was a kind of biomolecular library. The inscriptions on the artifact weren't primitive hieroglyphs as we initially thought. It was an advanced genetic code, a technology that allowed the surrounding plants to develop extraordinary regenerative properties." Downstairs, Alexander was finishing his call with a disturbed expression. Robert had confirmed his suspicions. Military satellites had detected new magnetic activity in the artifact's region. Claire continued listening to the recording, her hands trembling as she took notes. "The algorithm I developed doesn't just serve to locate the artifact, dear. It's the key to decoding the instructions engraved on its surface. Beatrice and her team want to use this knowledge to create patents, expensive medications that only the elite could afford. But the true purpose of this technology is much greater." Mary Helen's voice trembled slightly. "The artifact is a gift to humanity, Claire. It can teach us to cure diseases, regenerate entire ecosystems, maybe even reverse environmental damage, but in the wrong hands." A noise in the hallway made Claire quickly pause the recording. Footsteps were approaching her room. She quickly closed the laptop and grabbed a random book from the shelf, pretending to read when her father knocked on the door. "Claire?" Alexander called, entering the room. "We need to talk." She marked a random page in the book and looked at her father. "About what?" "About your mother," he replied, sitting on the edge of the bed. "About what really happened in Operation Antares." Claire felt her heart race. Was her father finally ready to reveal the truth? Or would it be another attempt to protect her, hiding the most important facts? "What you discovered today with Beatrice," he began, carefully choosing his words, "is only part of the story. Your mother and I, we didn't meet by chance." "You were assigned to the same operation," Claire completed, surprising Alexander. "She as a scientist, you as a security agent." Alexander nodded slowly. "But there was more, much more. Your mother wasn't just researching medicinal plants. She was investigating something that could change the course of human history." "The artifact," Claire said, deciding to risk it. "The true source of the regenerative properties." Alexander's face paled. "How did you—" Before he could complete the phrase, Claire's laptop emitted a sharp sound. The program had finished processing the musical algorithm. On the screen, a sequence of symbols pulsed in green. Decoding complete. Molecular pattern identified. Father and daughter looked at each other. At that moment, both knew there was no going back. Mary Helen's legacy was alive in the code she had left, and now Claire had the key to unravel it completely. "She knew you would figure it out," Alexander said softly, a mixture of pride and concern in his voice. "Your mother always said you had inherited the best of both of us, my determination and her genius." Claire opened the laptop again, showing her father the discovered patterns. "This isn't just a map or a code, Dad. It's a molecular symphony. Each note, each harmony, they're precise instructions to activate the artifact's regenerative potential." Outside the mansion, a figure observed the scene through night vision binoculars. Beatrice smiled, picking up her phone. "She did it," she said to someone on the other end of the line. "Claire decoded the algorithm. We can proceed with the next phase." The night was advancing as Claire and Alexander analyzed the results of the decoding. The study was plunged into semi-darkness, illuminated only by the bluish light of the laptop and a few old lamps. Empty coffee cups accumulated on the mahogany desk. "Look at this, Dad." Claire pointed to a specific sequence on the screen. "The molecular structure that Mom discovered. It replicates differently from anything we know. It's as if it could adapt to any environment, any DNA." Alexander leaned over the laptop, his tired eyes trying to absorb the complexity of the data. "Your mother once tried to explain to me. She said the universe is a great symphony and we needed to learn to listen before trying to conduct it." Claire nodded, tears in her eyes. "And that's why she chose music as the code. It wasn't just a way to hide information, it was a message in itself." The decoder began to emit a crystalline melody, perfectly synchronized with the pulsations of the artifact. The surrounding plants responded, their molecular structures reconfiguring into increasingly complex and harmonious patterns. "Look," Robert pointed to the monitors. "The transformations. They're spreading through the forest, but in a controlled, natural way." Beatrice stepped forward, trying to interfere. "We can't lose control now. All our work." "It's not about control," Claire interrupted her, her voice firm. "It's about understanding. The artifact isn't a weapon or a tool. It's a gift left here millennia ago by a civilization that learned to live in perfect harmony with the universe." The inscriptions on the artifact glowed more intensely, projecting holographic images in the air. They were visions of distant worlds, civilizations that had learned the same lesson now being offered to humanity. "It's a network," Claire explained, amazed. "A network of knowledge spread throughout the galaxy. Each artifact is a node, waiting for the moment when each civilization is ready to understand its message." Beatrice watched, her resistance beginning to yield in the face of the magnitude of what she was witnessing. "All these years, we thought we were studying alien technology, but actually, we were being studied," Alexander completed. "The artifact was waiting, observing, until it found someone who could truly understand its message." Claire raised the decoder, now fully synchronized with the artifact. The music emanating from it was no longer just a code. It was a bridge between worlds, a universal language that transcended the barriers of time and space. "Mom knew," she said softly. "She knew we weren't ready for all this knowledge at once. That's why she created the algorithm, why she chose to teach me music from a young age. She was preparing me for this moment." The artifact began to transform, its physical structure dissolving into pure energy. But instead of destruction, it was a metamorphosis. It was integrating itself into the forest itself, transforming it into a new type of ecosystem, one that could teach humanity the secrets of true harmony with nature. Beatrice took a step back, finally understanding. All this time, seeking power, control, when the true gift was understanding. And now, Claire smiled, we can really start to learn. The last notes of the cosmic symphony echoed through the transformed forest. The rising sun cast its first rays through the treetops, illuminating a world that would never be the same. Not because of an all-powerful alien technology, but through the understanding that true power lies in harmony, in connection, in the ability to hear the music that permeates all existence. Alexander hugged his daughter, pride and love overflowing in his heart. "Your mother would be so proud, Claire. You didn't just decipher the code, you understood the message." Claire looked at the sunrise, at the transformed forest, at her mother's legacy finally realized. The artifact had fulfilled its purpose, not as a source of power, but as a teacher of a lesson long forgotten by humanity. "The music continues," she said, smiling through tears. "And now, it's our turn to help others hear it." In the depths of the Amazon rainforest, a new symphony was beginning, not of conquest or control, but of harmony and understanding. And somewhere, Mary Helen smiled, knowing that her greatest discovery was safe in the hands of her daughter, a guardian not of secrets, but of wisdom. The true transformation wasn't in the power of the artifact, but in the human capacity to understand, grow and evolve. Claire had found her mission, to be a bridge between worlds, an interpreter of the great cosmic symphony that her mother had helped to reveal. And so, under the Amazonian sky, a new era began, not with a bang of power, but with the soft melody of universal understanding.